The galaxy was vast, but its underworld was even larger. Among the countless factions, crime lords, and shadow organizations, none were as feared as the Galactic Syndicate. Their power extended beyond star systems, beyond planetary governments, and even beyond the reach of the so-called peacekeepers of the Galactic Council. They ruled from the shadows, enforcing their will through assassins, bounty hunters, and warlords. When the Syndicate placed a bounty on someone's head, it was absolute. No questions, no hesitation. The target simply ceased to exist. Tonight, a new contract had been issued, and it was a peculiar one. The target was a human, a single human. Syndicate bounties were typically reserved for warlords who had crossed the wrong people, rogue assassins who had betrayed their code, or rival factions that needed to be erased. But this was unusual. His name, Dane Voss, former soldier, mercenary, wanted dead. The reward, 100 million credits. That number alone sent ripples through the criminal world. No one had ever seen such a high price on a single man. People whispered in dark corners, speculating on what this human had done to warrant such an astronomical bounty. But the Syndicate didn't deal in rumors. They dealt in results. And so, they assigned the contract to the Phantom Trio, 3 of the deadliest assassins in the galaxy. The Phantom Trio. The first was Vector, a towering reptilian warrior from the Zarnak system. His species, the Drakari, were known for their brute strength, regenerative abilities, and unshakable loyalty to the highest bidder. Vector had shattered entire squads with his bare hands and was infamous for his dual plasma axes, weapons so hot they melted steel upon impact. The second was Nyx 7, an AI-enhanced sniper. Once a human, now more machine than flesh, he had undergone extensive cybernetic augmentation. His optical targeting system allowed him to shoot a moving target from orbit, and his reaction speed outmatched any biological creature. No one escaped his scope. The third was Kael'Ris, a master stealth and deception. She hailed from the Scytheri, a species of shadow dwellers with reflexes so sharp they were nearly precognitive. Cloaked in her adaptive camouflage, she could disappear in plain sight. Many had died without ever knowing she was there. Together, they had a perfect record. Over 1,000 contracts, each completed without failure. Tonight, they would add one more to their list. The briefing. Aboard their sleek, black warship, the Obsidian Fawn, the trio gathered around a holographic display, studying the details of their latest target. Kael'Ris leaned forward, narrowing her glowing violet eyes at the floating data files. "A human," she muttered. "This has to be a joke." Nyx 7's mechanical voice hummed. "The Syndicate does not joke." His cybernetic fingers tapped on the table, bringing up an image of Dane Voss. The holographic figure was a tall, battle-hardened man with cold, piercing eyes. Scarred, worn, but calculating. Vector let out a deep, guttural chuckle. This will be over quickly. A single human against us? Hardly a challenge. Nyx 7 remained silent for a moment before his red targeting lens flickered. "There is something odd." Kael'Ris arched a brow. "What?" Nyx 7 enlarged a specific piece of data. The moment it appeared, the room fell into a deep silence. A kill count. 4,327 confirmed kills. For the first time, even the seasoned assassins hesitated. Kael'Ris leaned closer. "That can't be right. That's more than an entire mercenary battalion." Vector's grin faded slightly. "Even for a war veteran, that number is insane. No human should be capable of that." Nyx 7's voice remained cold. "And yet, the data is correct." A chill settled in the room. Kael'Ris tapped her fingers against the table, deep in thought. Something doesn't add up. If he's this dangerous, why hasn't the Syndicate warned us? Vector growled. "Because they want us to think it's easy. They want us overconfident." He clenched a massive fist. "But I don't care. No human, no matter how skilled, can take on all 3 of us." Kael'Ris wasn't so sure. She had killed thousands in her lifetime, but something about this mission felt wrong. "Where is he now?" she asked. Nyx 7 zoomed in on the map. A barren world. Draken 4. It used to be a war zone, now abandoned. No cities. No reinforcements. Just ruins. Vector snorted. Then he has nowhere to run. Kael'Ris wasn't so sure about that, either. Descent to Draken, 4. The obsidian Fong entered the atmosphere of Draken. 4. A world of red sand, ruined fortifications, and scorched battlefields. The remains of a long-forgotten war stretched for miles, littered with rusting vehicles and collapsed bunkers. Dane Voss had made this wasteland his home. As the ship hovered over the surface, scanning for life signs, Nix 7 systems flickered. No signals. He's running dark. Vector tightened his grip on his plasma axes. We go in silent. Kill him before he even knows we're here. The phantom trio descended onto the surface, their dark figures blending into the ruins. Kael'Ris activated her cloaking device, vanishing from sight. Vector moved with surprising silence for a being of his size, his predatory instincts guiding him. Nix 7 took position atop a broken tower, his sniper rifle scanning the terrain. Still nothing. The air was thick with tension. Kael'Ris whispered through the comms. Something's not right. A soldier this skill wouldn't just sit and wait for death. Vector scoffed. Then let him try to surprise us. It won't save him. Then a voice echoed through the ruins. A cold, steady voice. You should have turned back. The assassins froze. Vector growled, turning toward the sound. Show yourself human. Silence. Then a single gunshot. Nix 7 barely moved in time. A bullet zipped past his head, embedding itself in the metal beside him. He recalibrated instantly, scanning for the shooter, but there was no one there. Target engaged. Nix 7 said through the comms. He's fast. Kael'Ris' breath caught in her throat. A sniper who could fire at Nix 7 and evade detection? That was impossible. Vector snarled. Enough games. He activated his energy shields and charged forward into the ruins. A shadow moved. Before the massive reptilian could react, Dane Voss appeared behind him and plunged a knife straight into his side. Vector howled in pain. Kael'Ris' heart pounded. He was too fast, too precise. They had severely underestimated him, and they were about to pay the price. A deep, searing pain unlike anything Vector had ever felt before. The massive reptilian assassin staggered, blood oozing from the wound in his side. Dane Voss had struck with surgical precision, slicing between his armored scales with the efficiency of a seasoned killer. Vector swung his plasma axe in retaliation, but Dane had already moved. Too fast, too fluid. Kael'Ris watched in shock from her position in the shadows. Her cloaking field shimmered as she tightened her grip on her daggers, forcing herself to breathe evenly. She had never seen someone dodge Vector's attacks so effortlessly. "Vec, fall back," she ordered over the comms. "Not yet," the reptilian growled, bracing himself. His wound was already starting to close, thanks to his species' accelerated healing. He raised his axes, preparing to crush Dane with a single blow. But the human vanished again. Nix 7, still stationed atop the ruins, locked onto him with his sniper scope. "I have him," the cybernetic assassin reported, his targeting systems calculating the trajectory. His mechanical eye glowed red as he fired. The bullet zipped through the air, faster than sound, designed to pierce through starship hulls. Dane moved at the last possible second. The bullet missed. Nix 7's targeting systems glitched for a fraction of a second. That should have been impossible. A normal target wouldn't have even seen the shot coming. But Dane? He had reacted before the bullet had even reached him. Kael'Ris' stomach twisted. How was he doing this? Vector charged again, rage fueling his every move. His plasma axes hummed, glowing with deadly energy. "Face me, coward." Dane's response was brutal. He didn't retreat this time. Instead, he closed the distance, stepping inside Vector's guard. The move was so fast that even Nix 7's enhanced optics struggled to track it. Then, a flash of steel. Dane's knife carved a deep gash across Vector's chest before the assassin could react. Vector howled in agony, stumbling back. And that was when Kael'Ris saw it. Dane wasn't just fast. He knew their attacks before they even made them. It wasn't raw speed that saved him from Nix 7's shot. It was experience. He had fought hundreds of enemies just like them. He had memorized every combat style, every predictable move, every weakness. Kale Riss whispered through the comms, her voice tight. "We need to regroup. Now." Vector, panting, spat blood onto the ground. His massive frame trembled, and his grip on his axes weakened. "He's toying with us," he snarled. Nick's 7 cybernetic voice was colder than usual. "No, he's studying us." Kael'rith's blood ran cold. The realization hit her like a bullet to the chest. Dane Voss wasn't fighting them. He was analyzing them. Their patterns, their strengths, their weaknesses. And the moment he figured them out, he was going to kill them all. The fight turns. "Retreat," Kael'rith ordered. "Now!" Vector growled. "I don't run." But even he knew they were outmatched. Dane Voss took a slow step forward, his boots crunching against the debris. His expression remained unreadable. Calm, collected, like a predator that had already won. "You're smarter than most," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the ruins. "But it's too late." Kael'rith didn't hesitate. She threw a smoke bomb at the ground, shrouding the battlefield in thick, black mist. She grabbed Vector by the arm and activated her personal teleporter. A second later, they reappeared behind cover. Nyx, 7 disengaged immediately, using his own tactical cloaking to reposition himself on another rooftop. Dane didn't chase, because he didn't need to. Instead, he stood in the smoke, completely relaxed. Kael'rith was about to whisper a new strategy over the comms when she heard his voice. "How many jobs have you taken?" Dane asked casually, his tone almost conversational. Silence. Then, the sound of a blade being unsheathed. "I've killed assassins like you before," he continued. "Warlords, mercenaries, soldiers." Kael'rith felt a chill creep up her spine. Then Dane Voss said the words that made her heart stop. "I know exactly how you're going to die." Before she could react, a gunshot rang out. Nyx! 7 had fired again, but this time he was too slow. Dane had already closed the distance. A knife slammed into Nyx 7's mechanical eye. Sparks exploded. Nyx 7 collapsed. Kael'rith barely had time to process what had happened before Dane was already moving toward them. Vector, still bleeding, raised his axes one final time. He lunged, only for Dane to sidestep him again, grabbing his arm and dislocating it with a brutal twist. The massive reptilian let out a strangled roar of pain. Kael'rith finally attacked, twin daggers flashing. She was fast, one of the fastest killers in the galaxy. But Dane was faster. He parried her attack effortlessly, twisting her wrist and forcing her to drop her weapons. A second later, he had his gun pressed against her forehead. Vector, now on one knee, let out a ragged breath. His axes lay abandoned beside him. Nyx 7's cybernetic body twitched, sparks flickering from his ruined eye socket. They had lost. The revelation. For the first time in her life, Kael'rith felt something alien creep into her mind. Fear. She had fought countless opponents, some stronger, some faster, but none like this. None like Dane Voss. He had played with them, learned from them, adapted to them. She had never seen anyone do that before. Dane studied her for a moment before lowering his gun. "They didn't tell you, did they?" he asked. Kael'rith panted, her hands trembling. "Tell us what?" Dane let out a slow, mirthless chuckle. "The Syndicate doesn't want me dead because I'm a threat to them." His eyes darkened. "They want me dead because I used to be one of them." Silence. Kael'rith felt her breath catch in her throat. "What?" Dane smirked, wiping blood from his knife. "They trained me," he said. "Enhanced me. Used me to eliminate their enemies. Until I realized something." His expression hardened. They weren't just killing criminals. They were wiping out entire colonies. Innocents. Families. Children. Kael'rith felt nausea twist in her stomach. Dane's voice dropped lower. "I refuse to be their weapon, so I turned my blade against them." Vector clenched his fists, realization dawning on his bruised face. "That's why they put this bounty on you." Dane nodded. "And they lied to you." Kael'rith glanced at her fallen comrades. They had been sent here to die. Dane had every right to kill them, and yet he hadn't. Kael'ris swallowed hard. "Why haven't you killed us?" she whispered. Dane's eyes burned with something darker than hatred. "Because I don't need to," he said. He extended a hand. "Help me burn the syndicate to the ground." Kael'ris hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached for his hand. For the first time in her life, Kael'ris felt uncertainty. She had spent years as a ghost, slipping to the galaxy as a silent executioner, never questioning the contract she took. The Galactic Syndicate was her employer, her master, her god. She never asked why a target had to die. She only ensured they did. But now, with Dane Voss standing before her, offering her a hand instead of blade, she felt something foreign. Doubt. Her instinct screamed at her to finish the job, to slit his throat and claim the 100 million credit bounty. But her mind, her gut, whispered something else. The Syndicate had lied to them. They had sent them to die. Vector, still breathing heavily, was watching Dane with a mix of admiration and frustration. The massive reptilian had been bested, outmatched by a single human. His warrior pride demanded vengeance, but his survival instincts told him the fight was already lost. Nix 7, his cybernetic eye flickering from the damage Dane had inflicted, was the first to break the silence. His voice, usually cold and mechanical, was now strained. "You are saying, Nix 7 rasped, his vocal processors struggling, that the Syndicate fears you because you know their secrets?" Dane smirked. "Not just their secrets." He crouched, wiping blood from his blade. "I know how to destroy them." Kael'ris exhaled, her mind racing. She had been with the Syndicate for years. Killed for them, stole for them, burned entire factions to the ground without hesitation. But she had never questioned why. Until now. "Why would we trust you?" she asked. Dane shrugged. "You shouldn't. But here's the thing. You're smart enough to realize what just happened. The Syndicate wanted me dead, and they sent their best to do it." He nodded toward Nix 7's damaged faceplate and Vector's deep wounds. "And yet, here you are," he continued, "still breathing. Why do you think that is?" Kael'ris clenched her jaw. "Because we weren't supposed to win." She turned toward Nix 7, searching for confirmation. The sniper hesitated, then gave a single nod. "We were expendable," Nix 7 said, his voice tinged with something Kael'ris had never heard from him before. Anger. Vector let out a deep, rumbling growl, his fist tightening. "The Syndicate does not waste assets. Unless..." His yellow reptilian eyes burned with understanding. "Unless they fear them." Dane smirked. "Now you're getting it. A new war begins." The wind howled to the ruins of Draken. 4. Carrying the scent of scorched metal and blood. Dane stood at the center of it all, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. The Syndicate controls half the galaxy. They bribe politicians, enslave entire species, and wiped out anyone who stands against them. His voice was steady, unwavering. "They don't just want me dead. They want anyone who questions them erased." Kael'ris exchanged glances with her team. They had been the best, the most feared assassins in the galaxy. And yet, to the Syndicate, they were just tools, disposable weapons to be discarded the moment they were inconvenient. She thought about 1,000 lives she had taken in service to an organization that didn't care if she lived or died. Her hands trembled at the realization. Vector's fist slammed into a nearby chunk of debris, sending dust flying. His breathing was ragged, his wounds still healing. "I will not be their pawn," he snarled. Nix 7, his optics still flickering, spoke calmly. "Logically, our best course of action is survival. The Syndicate will not allow us to walk away from this mission empty-handed." Kael'ris took a slow breath. "Then we take the fight to them." Dane's smirk deepened. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." Breaking the Syndicate. Dane led them into a nearby underground bunker, one of the few intact structures in the ruined city. The inside was dimly lit, filled with old weapon caches and outdated surveillance equipment. This was a resistance outpost. Dane explained, moving toward a console, before the Syndicate wiped them out. Kael'ris watched as he activated the terminal, revealing a star map filled with Syndicate-controlled zones. Red markers pulsed over major star systems, showing key locations, black sites, arms depots, high-profile targets. This is where we start, Dane said, pointing to a heavily fortified station orbiting the Sauron Nebula. The Syndicate moves most of their high-value prisoners through this station. It's also where they keep a list of every operative in their employment. Kael'ris narrowed her eyes. Including assassins like us? Dane nodded. Names, mission records, weaknesses. If we steal that data, we can expose every dirty deal they've ever made. Nix, Seven studied the schematics, processing the information. Security will be heavy. Dane smirked. Then it's a good thing I have 3 of the deadliest assassins in the galaxy on my side. Vector cracked his knuckles. This time we choose who dies. Kael'ris exhaled slowly. She had spent years taking orders, obeying without question. But for the first time, she was making her own choice. Then let's burn the Syndicate to the ground. Epilogue. A shadow war begins. Across the galaxy, in the heart of a Syndicate stronghold, a figure stood in front of a massive screen, watching a live data feed. The failed assassination attempt on Dane Voss had already reached their ears. A woman in a crimson robe turned to a mass enforcer, standing at her side. "The assassins we sent have sided with him," she said coldly. The enforcer nodded. "We should send more hunters." The woman tilted her head, a cruel smile forming. "No, let them believe they have won. Let them run. Let them think they have the advantage." Her eyes gleamed. "And when the time is right, we crush them all.